Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited that this is our inaugural podcast.
Oh, great.
We are wanting to talk to people who are making a change in government. We're focused on communication. We're focused on constituent services. I've had the pleasure of working with people in government for a long time now, and you're one of the first people who I met who we really connected, and you are different from what people expect from someone who is committing their career to work in government. But through my experience, I've come to meet actually a lot of people like you, and you're very connected to those people. You often know the same people, whether I know it or not, until it comes up in conversation. And I am glad to have the opportunity to share that with our audience.
Awesome. And I'm glad that the inaugural one gets to be here in this great courthouse in Rockville. This is the place where Thurgood Marshall made the case for equal pay for Black bureaucrats in the Diggs case. And this is also on unceded territory that we're in. That's a government building. And so we're now transforming this government building. The canines used to run back and forth as part of the training ground, and now it's a space for open innovation. And our hope is that both constituents as well as people in government can sit in offices together and really begin to connect more as humans.
So that's a good segue into letting our audience know who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah.
You work with Montgomery County, and I'd love you to tell us a little bit about what that work is and how you got there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Michael, as you know, and I serve as a resource and advocate for people making things better, just, human, and liberating. And I have the pleasure of leading the innovation team, which we hope, and really leading innovation in Montgomery County government. And what we hope is that innovation team includes all 9,000 employees here, as well as the over 1 million residents and visitors who come through every single day. And so on the innovation team, we work with the people of Montgomery County government, building power and organizing systems to meet our community's needs.
What drew you to government? I know that when you were in Chattanooga, you were also working in a government position.
Yeah, my first government position was in Boston, where Mayor Menino invited a bunch of kids into the room, and I got to be one of those kids for our mayor's youth council. And his cat, and the story, it's apocryphal, and he mumbled, so no one really knows what he said apparently. But Patty McMahon said, who was running the council for many years, said, "Mayor, what do you want the kids to do?" And he said, "I want them to tell me what to do." And it was this incredibly powerful moment to be in high school and think, I think this is as powerful as my voice is going to get. What they push us to do is not just speak on our own behalf, but rather to engage with the people in the neighborhood where I grew up, Austin, Brighton, and to make sure that we're bringing all of those voices in. But the police chief would come in and say, "Hey, I want to run a new gang initiative, a new group violence initiative." This was a redux of Operation Ceasefire. And the mayor would say, "Well, have you talked to the young people about it?" And if he hadn't, then he'd send them back. And so that was powerful. And then also was this cool, like the police there were right next to the clerk's office, were right next to, permitting services. And I thought like, wow, local government is where we actually get to serve our neighbors. We get to be a part of our communities. And it's where that connection space happens between people and their government. And so, I went off and I eventually was doing some community organizing thanks to a mentor of mine in Chattanooga, Tennessee, for a guy who then became mayor, Andy Burke. And Mayor Burke gave me the opportunity to come back to Chattanooga. I had moved on. I was doing some data analytics and strategy work in marketing, to come back and get to work in his administration, leading policy and then leading innovation.
So you've had the opportunity because of the nature of your work, because you work with a lot of different people in different government positions, different departments and agencies. And I'd love to talk a little bit about what you, through all of that experience, what you see as some of the most important considerations for constituent experience and generally how people in government think about it, and particularly people like you who are making a change and being really thoughtful about what it looks like.
Yeah. I think it's important to do what you just said, which is it's people in government, right? Government is just a bunch of people, and we also happen to live in communities and in neighborhoods. And so often when we get lost is on the other side of that form, right? Where I stop seeing you as a human, I just see you as the form that I've submitted, that you submitted to me. Mm-hmm. And you don't see me on the other side of that form. You just see the form. this like cold bureaucratic form that's hard to fill out that you have to fax into me. And that doesn't work. When we think about sort of the constituent experience, we think about really going beyond customer service, right? Because we don't want customers, we want constituents, we don't want services, we want experiences that we can build together towards a common or a public good.
And I think that is the thing that, to me, distinguishes your approach and your school of approach, which is it's easy to think of the government as a bureaucracy, which I think by definition it is.
Yeah, I'm a proud bureaucrat.
Yes, exactly. And when you think about an employee base of 9,000 people, like Montgomery County, and you think about, not even necessarily for Montgomery, but for any local government, the perception and often the reality that it is a slow-moving beast that has systems that have grown organically over time that are difficult to move, that, you know, the end result of which is something that's difficult to navigate, that's sometimes opaque.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, can I stop you?
Yeah.
Because that's the story that we keep telling.
Yeah.
And then we're shaping again and again this perception. And one of the things that we're doing is changing that story. So often people say, I would love to innovate in government, but you got to change the culture first, right? But culture is built in action.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Lunas of the Behavioral Insights team, we are working on a project to increase diversity in police recruiting in Chattanooga together. And she reminded me that so often we think we have to start with convincing someone of the why. So they'll have to change their attitude in order to change their behavior. And she said, yes, and it's also an endogenous relationship. A shapes B as B shapes A. So if we can shift someone's behavior, right, get them to give up meat for a day,
right,
they will then change their attitude and tell you all the reasons why being a vegetarian is a great reason.
Right. And
so rather than having a big plan to try to change culture, we are trying to change action, and we are in the game of behavior change here, and then storytelling. And so we sort of have three pillars in the innovation program, one of which, open innovation, is about opening innovation up to everyone, to play, to curiosity. And one thing that we have there is change stories. And change stories is about hearing the voices of our fellows, of our peers, those amazing people across government. So we've done some work with chief innovation officers around the country, but also here in our own government, to tell those stories of people starting small and scaling, of people recognizing their own power, of people making the invisible visible, of centering those humans and those voices to tell the story of how they created change, so that we're changing our collective story of what is possible. Because no one gets into government for the pay, right? People get into government because they want to make a difference in their communities. And our job is to make sure, and innovation is to make sure that everyone has the resources and the tools that they need to deliver amazing constituent experience and to change the stories that we're telling of government.
Do other governments operate in that way, or do other innovation departments operate in that way, where they're embedding people within the departments and agencies?
Yeah, of course. It was not a novel idea. We copy as a creative act. I think Calgary does a similar initiative, but they sort of like hire in, I want to say like project management talent that then gets sort of seconded out. Tracy, who used to run the team in Long Beach, California, would have sort of a fee-for-service model to keep her team going. And she saw her job as bringing in talent and then getting that talent promoted to run organizations. The Atlanta I team in their initial iteration, everyone is now broken across organizations. What really matters is the connections that people build across departments and across teams, so that when someone is, Patricia, who's working in Health and Human Services, and she was struggling, she works with families, or she did until she got a promotion. Patricia Biwat works with families to advocate on their behalf when they have a child who has a disability. And those families love working with her. But her boss was always frustrated with her because she wasn't getting her paperwork in time. And if you don't get your paperwork in time, then you have to file a report about why your paperwork was late, which, as you can imagine, you drown in paperwork. So what was causing her this delay was the scheduling back and forth. So she worked with Anna Yee, who's in our TEBS department, who's leading a citizen developers program, who is in the same accelerator cohort as her. And the two of them connected and then brought in an existing piece of technology that they were using in a different way. So that now it's really easy to schedule calls with Patricia. She doesn't have to worry about being on an email responding back and forth. And she can spend more of her time doing what she does best, which is connecting and supporting with families. And that's why, like we're all about new technology, but really it's about putting the human before technology. Artificial intelligence, especially now, is incredible. To us, it's just how do we free up more of the human intelligence, which is locked up inside of government and inside of communities to achieve our common goods.
That's great. One of the things that makes me think about, I often think about the constituent experience just based on the nature of my work, my prior work. Yeah. And so the experience of someone not being able to find what they're looking for, or having to go through multiple forms to, that are sometimes ambiguous when you start the process. So it's like, what's next?
Yeah.
What you've made me see is there's someone on the other side of that. They're usually just as frustrated.
More frustrated. Yeah.
Because they're dealing with that in spades, right?
Yeah.
So it's a win-win to begin to address those problems, because they are also, to your point, creating pain, frustration, and wasted time and talent.
Yeah.
On the side of the government agency, of the government itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we start using the word constituent instead of customer. A customer expects to be served, right? And constituent is people standing together and recognizing that shared humanity to create something better. Services, as a famous organizer once said, are bad for people, right? They create dependence. And there's an observation that neighborhoods that get lots of services often have the least amount of power. And so how do we sort of flip that script by working as community organizers inside of government? But yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to be in government. And it stinks even more if someone has been on the line for a really long time and then you get them. So we're seeing this a little bit right now. We just sent out a bunch of behaviorally informed postcards with support from the Behavioral Insights team, or some calls with the Behavioral Insights team. Also partnering with the lab at DC. We've got amazing neighbors all around us to help make sure that people could get their homestead tax credit. And often they were calling another number first, waiting in a long line, and then they got transferred in. This happened with Health and Human Services during the pandemic. And they rerouted the call system by listening to users' needs. Amanda on her team helped work with a bunch of folks in Health and Human Services here, so that if you'd been waiting for a really long time already, you got bumped in, even if it wasn't a line that we controlled, right? People don't care whether it's Health and Human Services, right, or the Office of Human Resources. They don't care, right? They don't care whether it's the city or the state or the county.
Absolutely.
They have a need to be met, and our job is to help ensure that our community's needs are met. So yeah, so it's chunks and bits of that, and there's cool ways to sort of inform it with data to make sure that we are, we know what's happening, and we also begin to see who it's happening to, disaggregating that data and better understanding who is being affected, and does someone's gender or race affect the services that they get, and how quickly and easily their needs are met.
That situation that you described of someone not knowing which department, which jurisdiction is providing the service, that's something we see over and over again. And I've heard this echoed in your stories, that one way of operating might be, well, that's not our service. That's not our responsibility. That's not the business activity that we're responsible for. Next. But the reality is, and you've talked about this, like if you're thinking about it from a perspective of, okay, what's kind of the origination of the need, and how does that person pursue the need? If they're coming to your door and asking for that service, it doesn't matter whether you provide whether it's you or the city or the state. Yeah. It's about how do you route that person to where they need to be and get them the information that they need.
Yeah, and that's about employees having the resources that they need to know where to direct folks, right? Otherwise, they can't provide that information to folks. Ms. Castillo, this is a really sort of a sad story, but Ms. Castillo in 2008 was living in Maryland, and a notice came through that she never received. It got lost somewhere in the bureaucracy, and she lost her home. And she had to leave Maryland and move in with her parents. And we don't want that to happen to anyone. And so now in the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, Bernice, who works there, she started as a 3-on-1 call taker. And she learned how to navigate all of those systems. But she said, what I really care about is people like Ms. Castillo who are losing their homes because they can't navigate these systems. I want to make sure they're taken care of. And so Bernice moved. She now works in the office of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. And what she saw was 4 different intake forms, right? We didn't even know where to route them, which form within that department. And she helped combine it into one form. She helped digitize that form. She translated it into Spanish. Now through the accelerator community, she's connected to our translation unit to make sure it's translated into all 7 languages so people are met in a language that they understand. And hopefully she's going to be scaling that more forward. And Bernice is Miss Castillo. It's Bernice Castillo. And she is doing it like so many other public servants around here because she has that lived experience and she cares and she wants to make sure that what happened to her doesn't happen to anyone else. And for me, I sort of came from the other side. Like I got to feel so powerful because of my local government. And I wanted to make sure that other people got to feel that same power that I did. And, you know, when I first got offered the job in Chattanooga, I was about to move to Singapore with this cool company. I'd been there the whole time. That's what I wanted. And they offered me a title. And I said, oh, that's a title, but I don't really want that. And someone said, like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, if we could start a mayor's youth council, that would be cool. And Mayor Burke said, great, make the best mayor's youth council. And so I got back into government to do the same thing that had been given to me. And so I think people join either because something bad happened or something good happened, but they have that desire to make sure that someone either doesn't have that experience again or someone does have that experience again.
So tell me what innovation looks like in Montgomery County.
Not like me. It looks like the 9,000 other people. And there are some amazing people who hopefully we'll get to interview in the future and come and join with us and get to meet them and hear their stories. And the sort of the pod that we have breaks into 3 buckets. We have the accelerator course in community. So you can, if you're interested in innovation, which is happening all over the place, right? Part of my job is to help tell the story, to change the story, to lift it up, to make sure there's resources and tools there and available. And then we're imagining what is the future that's coming and making sure that we have the skills and capabilities brought into government or grown in government to do that work. And that people who already have those skills have the freedom to actually do what they want to do. And you can be an accelerator, you can lead civic design, or you can open innovation. The accelerator is a course and it's a community. It's a course where we teach a series of problem-solving skills based on Denver's Peak Academy, Chattanooga's Peak Academy, and then it's sort of a behaviorally informed cohort-based model for this. So that's why Mow the Elephant is around. Where we learn a 9-step process, a 9-step course. We shape the course by walking it. We learn yichmad, self-efficacy. People learn that they are powerful, or they see, again, we recognize power by creating change, by having a course to create change, and by seeing other people around them create change. And so the accelerator course, you know, it's about, the civic design leads like to say, it is about how to more deeply understand the challenge, explore solutions, and deliver change. Or from a more beautiful question, a series of why questions, a series of what if questions, and a series of how might we questions. Why is change needed in the first place, right? From lots of different stakeholders. What does our current state look like? No solutions here. What does our current state feel like? What does it look like? Is there inequity in our processes? Are there errors in their processes? How many are we producing? What's the cost of that production? What does it feel like? What are those words that people say? Like with Sean, the business said, like, this, your form stinks, right? And then what do we want our future state to be? And then we get into that, exploring solutions. So we figure out what is the gap between the current state and the future state, right? Let's not tell people to build a bridge. Let's show them the canyon and let them find their own way across, because there's so many different ways that become available in that space, from spaceships to walking. So we then surface assumptions. So if we do this, then we think this can happen. And that is about really sort of, that's about setting up buckets for experiments so that those assumptions can be knocked down, can be challenged, can be tested. And only then do we begin to brainstorm solutions, step 6. And we brainstormed lots of solutions. We stick them onto an impact effort matrix. We said who is doing what by when to build our action plans. We figure out what our results are going to be and how they measure them, right? That's links back to our current state and our future state. So it's a process that is both sequential as well as it is iterative. And then we capture our learnings. And so people start small and scale. We follow the rules, and then we break the rules, and then we make new rules. And so they get accelerators. When you're an accelerator, you get introduced to this course. You shape the course by walking. You get connected to community, which is really the most powerful thing. It's community organizing in government to create change. So that's what it means to be an accelerator. The next chunk is leading civic design. So we have some really talented civic design leads here who are full-time, as well as some really incredible folks who lead civic design from their positions in the IT department, from their positions in Office of Consumer Protection, from their positions in Children, Youth, and Families, in Office of Eligibility and Support Services. And leading civic design is about bringing those tools of human-centered design. It's about how do we support our colleagues in more deeply understanding challenges and redesigning how government serves people. And there's sort of three pillars to that work. One is about making sure that services are transparent and empathetic and meet people's needs. The other is about making sure that those who are closest to the challenge and most impacted by the challenge really get to shape the solutions and shape the definition of those problems. And third is making sure that our colleagues across Montgomery County government, that's where the leadership comes in, are able to use the approaches and the practices, right? Not just the word, but the action as well, the practice of human-centered design and civic design to move things forward. And we sort of say civic design because we recognize, as those before us, the Equity by Design has an incredible sort of writing on this and Creative Reaction Lab that we want to really, again, not just adopt, but adapt to those tools. And so they lead sort of larger, civic design leads about leading larger demonstration projects, which help to shape that story. So if the accelerator says, when someone from the accelerator says, hey, we want to make something, we need more support in the accelerator course, we say, great, Patsy, who is the fire person in permitting services, what are you going to do about it? And Patsy came back and led a peer mentoring network inside of the accelerator. We said, all this soft skill stuff as we transform it online, that doesn't need to be in lecture. Let's have that in sort of conversation groups. So we said, great, Adrienne Malles-Holderbaum, who's also a librarian, and she put together a facilitation guide and a bunch of facilitators to facilitate learning circles, right? So the accelerator says, here's some tools, what are you going to do about it? We realize at the same time we want to sort of take a multi-tracked approach, and so leading civic design is about these bigger projects that demonstrate what might be possible so that we can get not just from the 30% to the 60%, which is the bulk of government innovation work, but really here's what's possible inside of government so that everyone can aspire. And we talked about how do we imagine better futures. It's about creating those imagined better futures in that space. So the civic design leads worked on a human-centered design process to reimagine the business center website, in part because we're about to redo all of our websites. And we want to show what's possible when we put humans before technology.
Great.
They worked on improving the diversity of police and improving police recruiting here in Montgomery County. They've worked on using a human-centered design process to guide a strategic plan for libraries that involved, how do we figure out what the future of libraries might look like? Well, it's Valentine's Day. What if we get hundreds of love notes from young people about what they love about library, and then librarians and library staff themselves synthesize that into key themes to build an equity-based action plan for the next 3 years of our libraries that they are putting into practice now, while more deeply integrating with recreation and with health and human services at the same time. So those are sort of the bigger demonstration projects. And that's what leading civic design is all about, is bringing and showing those new schools and those new skills and what's possible here. And the last piece is open innovation. And that's in part that you don't need to be an accelerator in order to innovate. It's about innovation showcases. So how do we make sure that all the amazing innovations that's happening when Patricia fixed that scheduling thing for herself, how do we make that spread across health and human services by showcasing and creating space to amplify her work? How do we open innovation to playfulness and curiosity with fellows, to bring them in, to run our Change Stories program, to do celebrity interviews, to play with liberating structures, and to open innovation for all. So it's being an accelerator, it's leading civic design, it's open innovation, and that creates a lot of space for some cool partnership for what's next.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And that exemplifies something that you've talked about before, which is, I heard you say, the accelerated course is not a training program, because training denotes something that is fixed in time, that's not continuous, and most people forget what they're trained on.
Yeah.
So rather, it's about creating these systems that make it continuous and self-propagating.
Yeah.
And you can hear that in some of these themes, like the civic design work is intended to be something that sets the bar for other people who are looking for inspiration.
And also sometimes you need muscle, right? Like you just need some extra support, and we can hire, we worked the libraries project, and Kate Frady's on the team led this. It was like her first week. We're like, hey, you like libraries? And she's like, yep. And she's a former educator. And so we threw her in, and she went to visit every single library, but they just needed some extra support. And they could have hired an outside consultant, their other option. Instead, they hired us internally. And at the end, what they said was, we didn't really, this was James, who happens to be an accelerator, who it was through the accelerator work that we built that trust. He said, we didn't know what we wanted to ask for, but you've now shown us a different way. Like we think these, we had to have a strategic plan so that you can get money from the state for capital improvements. Like it was just like a check the box exercise. And it became, a blow up the box and create new boxes and structures that liberate people to make decisions in different ways. And Anita, who's the head of libraries, said the other day, I got a $400 request for like pumpkins or something. And I had looked back and I said, is this about youth? Is it about like, how does this link to the strategic plan? And I was like, super cool. And so sometimes leading civic design is about giving a little bit of extra muscle and power to create space for people who are already in this government to do the work that they always could and do, and just be able to, we learn by doing, right? Understanding follows action. And I think it's important to think about sort of experience as action plus reflection. And so we have a value on the team of sort of creating space to make sure there's action and reflection, introducing sometimes small tools like plus deltas interestings. What worked that you might grow, what might you change, what did you notice, what's your wondering? And that's sort of an important piece that we begin to introduce across government.
That's great. I love the library example because first of all, you think about working on a capital plan, you think about working on a strategic plan, and it's like,
it's so great, and it sits on a library shelf someday, gathering dust, right? But that's not what we want of library shelves or strategic plans.
Let's put a ton of time into it
so
and never
much
use
time,
it.
Definitely.
The juxtaposition of like what I think about when I think about those types of projects versus the experience of receiving and reading notes from kids about what they love about libraries is like the most moving example of what it looks like to actually do something that impacts the way that people work and the experience that they have when they work. And letting people experience the joy and the fun that can be as much a part of work as the challenges and the frustrations.
And staff wrote destination postcards. We had Red Switch, we stole that idea, right? And so staff got postcards that Kate put together, and they wrote, here's what we want our future to look like. Here's our letter to self. In fact, the way that the accelerator, that Denver Peak Academy first moved to Chattanooga is Tim Moreland went and he wrote himself a letter at the end that says, you believe in this, you can do this, and he'll have the first one launched by January. And he stuck it on the door and he came back. And sure enough, in January, we had it launched with no new money, no new technology, and no new people, right? Which we think are the three greatest barriers to change. And we sort of disappeared. And then the mayor, so like often people say, oh, look, but I don't have permission.
Right.
Who cares, right? And so, I said, I was staffing the mayor and walking the mayor over and, okay, like, what am I doing? I said, well, you probably haven't seen me in meetings the last week. He's like, yeah, I was wondering where you were. It's like, well, we launched this thing called Chattanooga Peak Academy. We literally took their PowerPoint deck and then put a little white box of the word Denver and ran with it. And I said, and we've got about 30 employees here who have been spending the last 5 days getting ready to create change. They're about to go ignite their change by sharing why change is needed, the current state and the future state. And you're here to cheer them on. And he looks at me, and then he looked out, and he gave an inspiring speech because that's what Andy Burke is amazing at. And then he skipped his next meeting to sit there and hear how employees were going to create change. So we did it with no new budget, no new technology, no new people. And we share that. We try to share that because we want other people to go and do it too.
Cool. And it also sounds like, in addition to no new budget, no new people, no new technology, no approval.
Well, that was an exercise of some privilege. We work on that. We don't believe in buy-in. We think it's BS.
I heard you say that once. I was curious what you meant.
Yeah, like it's.
I suppose that's what you mean.
Well, like many innovation teams, or like the innovation labs, this is a model that we got to, thank goodness, learn from others. It's like we'll create something really cool and fun, and then we'll pass it off to a department to go take over. Mm-hmm. Like,
right.
And then you're surprised when like the baby isn't raised the way that you want it to be raised. And so, with why change is needed, beginning and rooting in those whys as part of that process, how do we understand the problem from everyone's perspective? We are trying to do more and more co-creation together. In the design world, we talk about the shift from design by to design for. So for design for to design by, and I think sort of the next iteration, this is much more aspiration than actualization, but Nidhi on our team is really sort of leading at the forefront of imagining what this looks like, is design with, which is where we are designers are rejecting their titles as designers. And when they think about leading civic design, they are creating space for others to do that work themselves. Recognizing that like when we say, oh, design by, that holding the agenda, that is a massively powerful force, right? That's the second face of power, Luke Singaventa. That's how Southern Democrats kept civil rights legislation off of the floor, right? They're operating on that second face of power, shaping the agenda. And people who are leading civic design or designers, when they take on the design mantle, they're shaping that agenda and they're shaping those results. And then in the same way that data and polling at the advent took people's perceptions of themselves and stuck it in a really hard to fight data-backed system, we're saying, a huge risk, I think, with human-centered design and government is saying, well, we don't need to do public meetings anymore. Those voices don't matter anymore because we've listened to people and here are the quotes that matter and we've synthesized that, right? Like that's crazy power. And when we recognize that power, it allows us to step back from that power and really create space for more people to design themselves. I think Brian in Minneapolis has a really cool innovation where he is, rather than when people show up for public meetings and you give them a gift card, he says, wait a second, if you're showing up to multiple meetings, you're actively contributing, we're gonna get you registered in our procurement system as a vendor so that you are a business consultant and your lived experience is valued at the same level as some business consultant on the outside. And it's like a really cool radical shift that shifts the way that people see themselves. It shifts the way that we see lived experience in government, and it really gets to that constituent, right? How do we stand together to build something better? Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I'm thinking about people listening who may not have the infrastructure or be ready to launch something like the accelerator course or some of the tools that you're talking about, but want to follow this example. And also, I'm taking into account your mantra of start small and scale.
Yeah.
How do you create a culture in which you're encouraging people to make changes to the processes that they're living and seeing and experiencing frustrations with? Like, how do you, if you're someone who's leading a team, how do you encourage and empower people on your team to start making the changes that they want to see in their work?
Start making the changes that you want to see in your work. Don't ask others to do what you wouldn't do yourself, right? Like go and try, right? If you see changes, go and start trying. We try to operate on a consent principle in an advice process. So if you see something that you want to be better, that only affects you, go do it. If it affects others, then ask for their advice and their wisdom. We go through a slate and then we ask, is this safe to try? And off we go. There's plenty of, reinventing orgs is a reason why I just got back in government, right? I'm trying to explore what is the future of local government organizations in the context of our current state of democracy, which is a representative democracy. Mm-hmm. That's a question that's very much about teal practices and about self-managed teams. And so yes, like what's the advice for getting started? Get started. There's a book, it's a conversation between Paulo Freire and Miles Horton at the Highland Center. Inspired the accelerator course, because I think it's called We Shape the Path by Walking. And they start the conversation by saying, I think the only way to get started is to start. And that's it. And we have that mantra of start small and scale. because I'm really bad at it, and it's really, really, really hard to do. It's hard to start. And so we try to start small. We talk about building power. And power, we're talking about sort of the king definition of power, the ability to create change. And so we work with the people of Montgomery County government, building power and organizing systems to meet our community's needs. And we're building power, we're organizing systems, right? That's community organizing, that's making those forms better, that's organizing our processes, it's reorganizing the systems and the hierarchies and the structures that we work in to meet our communities. And they recognize there's a diversity of communities of which we are a part, and all of us are part of many communities' needs together. And that's what we're trying to do right now. So copy, we have everything in a Google Drive. You can FOIA us if you want for everything, or you can just ask us nicely or not nicely, and we'll share it with you. Because we've been the amazing benefit of so many folks, even our business development, partnership development work. We called Calgary, and we called Baltimore, and we called Philly, and we said, do you have a document for this? And Tracy in Long Beach shipped hers over. So we believe that copying is a creative act. It's, as you said, the most fun, joyous part of being in government, is that when you copy from me, you create something new because you're on a new canvas. And then when you pass it back to me, I'm like, I never saw it that way before. Because you might have taken what I had, but you built something totally new in your act of trying to copy it to a new setting. And that's the joy of place-based work.
One of the things I think about, you introduced us to Suzanne, you introduced me to a lot of people, you've highlighted a lot of stories, and that's very much part of your ethos too. Clearly, it's in the work you do. It's also in the way that you operate, and you've said from the beginning, this isn't about my voice, this is about this person's voice, it's about Sean's voice, it's about Jessica's voice, it's about Suzanne's voice. And I was thinking about Suzanne's story when we were talking about starting small, when we were talking about what other organizations can take away. And one of the examples that she gave when I was talking to her was that one of the things she does in the course of improving Montgomery County's websites is when someone sends her what we call copy, but language for a website.
Love some copy.
Exactly. Yeah. They're giving her the definition maybe of a program or a service, and as is true in many fields, the language can be complex, it can be difficult to access, and the simple thing that she does is to write back and say, what if we were to say it this way?
Yeah, and showing models. I mean, Suzanne, that what if question, what a beautiful way to create change. It's a wondering, it's a noticing. What if we frame everything as an experiment, right? What if we just change it on the website to this language in this way, and if it doesn't work, we can always go back, right? And so it's that start small and scale. The opposite of that is where we build a big plan for change, and we all line up on the cliff where we're going to step off together, and what happened? We didn't create space for failure, right? And so we start small because you can the video guys will kill me if I stand up, but you take a little teeny step, right? And oops, there's no ground there, then you can take a step back.
Yeah.
And then try another step, and try another step. And if you're leading change, then you're saying, hey, I'm just going to try this, and no one needs to follow you off the cliff, right? Because you already said, I've got these 5 other things we're going to try. Remember surfacing assumptions, creating those buckets of change? If you come and bring a solution, smack down. If you come and say, here's why I think change is needed, and I think that you want change because of this reason. Is this true to you? I was wondering what if. I was wondering why. I was wondering then how might we? And here's all the ways. I'd love to test this assumption. It's maybe crazy. I'm probably crazy here. But what if we tried it this way? You create space to then step back and try another way and another way and another way. And that's why we think that introduction to structured problem solving is so valuable, because when people are trying to create change, Sean has hit so many walls and so many barriers over and over again. Anna's hitting walls and barriers every single day in her organization. But she has shaped that course over and over again by walking with others, so that when she doesn't know what that next step of change is, she goes, wait a second, I've been here before, I know what the next step is. And there's a lovely Kurt Vonnegut story, and at the end, one character asks the other, how did we get here? And they say, 1 foot in front of another. And that's how we make change.
Awesome, I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good segue, talking about using simple, plain, accessible language on websites. It's a good segue to the topic of constituent experience, and naturally that's a very big topic. It's something that you approach in a lot of different ways, but I was hoping that you could share your constituent experience standards.
Yeah.
Because I think that they are an excellent and concise set of standards.
So our standards were built with frontline employees, or I think it's better, there's a city manager in Santa Monica called them where the rubber meets the road versus the center of the wheel. So it's where the rubber meets the road and the road constituents themselves shaping the standards that we try to meet. And it started by saying, we want better customer service. We want better customer service. And it was like, either, hey, I'm already doing that, great, or like, what do you mean by that? So we want to define and set some standards as an umbrella for how we can achieve it, in different channels, the walk-in channel, the call-in channel, the digital channels. And we broke into 3 buckets, information bucket, customer service bucket, and service delivery bucket. And I think you'll sort of hear in stories from these accelerators, from those who are leading civic design, the ways in which they're bringing that about. And it's about making information easy to find and understandable and in my language, right? So Montgomery County is proud to have 4 of the top 10 most diverse cities in America. We are an amazing place for folks coming to this country to initially get settled. And so everything that we do, we have to translate into 7 different languages. But it's more than just 7 different languages. It's also about making sure that, as Suzanne does with her incredible work on plain language, that it is in words that people understand, right? The blue bin versus the 32-gallon bin. It's about information being complete and accurate, so that both as an employee and as a constituent, that's when people then call their city council members like, I got half of the information, but not enough to keep my house, so then I lost my house, right? How do we make sure that we're giving that information complete and accurate, recognizing, right, like government is a giant group of people, and so if I'm in health and human services, I might not know what's going on in procurement or in housing and community affairs that's going to affect that work.
You have what I consider to be a great set of constituent experience standards.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, sure. So these were, these are our standards. They were created by staff where the rubber meets the road, who are interacting with constituents every day. And they're trying to capture really what those constituents want, what they expect. So they break into information, customer service, and service delivery. When we think about information, sort of what Suzanne was talking about, it's making sure that information is easy to find, it's understandable, and it's in my language, whether it's in one of the 7 languages that all of our work is translated in Montgomery County, or it's the blue bin that I'm looking for instead of the 32-gallon recycling bin. It's that information is complete and information is accurate, right? Otherwise, people don't get what they need, and they go and they call again and again, and we create these long wait lines, and then they call council members and county executives and mayors. For customer service, it's about making sure that it's easy and quick to get help when I need it. Not when I don't need it, right? I need help now. Let's make sure that it's easy and quick to get the help that I need. And finally, in customer service, it's about making sure that customer service is courteous, that's empathetic, and that's informative. And that requires employees to be informed and to have access to the information, right? And not in a mess. Let's shrink those knowledge base articles down, right? That's some incredible work that Chris Turner's doing in Thread 1. That's empathetic, right? If I expect empathy from you, then I need to make sure that my systems as an employee are empathetic, right? There's no constituent experience without an employee experience, and courteous. And then that service delivery, it's easy to request a service, right? If you need a service, it's easy to request it. It's easy to get my need met. I know what to expect. How hard is that, right? So often those extra calls come, there's a long, long line to get rental assistance because people are calling back to ask where their application was, right? So it's easy I want to be able to, I know what to expect. And finally, it's that services are delivered in a timely and a complete manner. A service half delivered, right? It's a work in progress. We need a clear definition of done, and we need to hit it. And that might be a service that is cross-departmentally delivered. Because we talked about before, people aren't getting services, if you get something from DHCA and Housing and Community Affairs, and Health and Human Services, and Children, Youth, and Families, which is part of Health and Human Services, but you also need some behavioral health and some food services. You don't need to navigate all of that. When services are delivered in a way that is timely, in a complete manner, it's about making sure that we're linking when someone comes for food, we're figuring out what else might they also need and getting that to them when they need it.
And that is also, to me, exemplary of that first principle of information is information that they understand. It's in their language.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a little bit before, but even that last example of having to navigate 3 different departments to get something that I perceive as a single need or a single service.
That's right.
What we're talking about is we don't require the constituent to know that. We don't require the constituent to know how the sausage is made and which departments are involved in that process. They need a thing.
Because humans don't come for services. Humans come to get their needs met. And so if the service is broken across 3 state agencies and a county agency and a city agency and 4 different agencies within our health and human services within the county, our job is to make sure that their needs are met. And it's too often when we're measuring and we're saying, well, I did my service, right? But a 90% fail rate, a 90% success rate across 5 services is a failing rate, right? And so we've got to shift. It's about shifting our perspective from government speak to a language that constituents understand, from providing of government services to understanding and meeting human needs. And that's why even those constituent experience standards, they are written from the perspective of a constituent, right? It is easy to request a service. I know what to expect. Services are delivered to me in a timely and complete manner. And so even in the writing of these, right, our words shape our actions, and our actions shape our patterns and right? Like we want to reshape the way that we're doing government by changing the words that we're using inside of government, because those words do matter and they count.
Absolutely. I love that. They do set a high bar for others to map to and to use as like you even said it before, you use them in practice by saying, okay, if we're working on improving a certain service, a certain way of communicating, we're looking to these standards in order to say, like, are we meeting our goals?
Yeah. I mean, yes, and the words aren't enough. So first I want to give credit to Amanda Usack and Evan Chan and Chris Turner and Victoria Lewis and Brian Roberts, who brought together constituent experience liaisons from around the county to shape those up. And they did an incredible job of refining and defining and synthesizing something together. And just as we saw with the work that Kate did with libraries to say this strategic plan needs to be shifted into action, right? The question is, how do we bring these constituent experience to life? How do we make sure that they're not just an aspiration, but an actualization? And that's where we're working on right now. And we invite people who have ideas or experiences to reach out to us and let us know what we can be doing. We welcome in fellows to come and help us figure this out. And very much, we're thinking about it in 3 buckets of work right now with our constituent experience initiative from the county executive's office. And one is about support structures, right? So if you in your customer service job are supposed to provide services, fully informative services, then let's make sure that you have all the information you need to navigate the bureaucracy yourself. So we're thinking about support structures. Chris Turner on the 3-on-1 team is doing some radical thinking about what would it look like to bring people who have full-time jobs and experiences together to make sure that, Berenice Castillo went and translated that form into Spanish herself because she did not know that we have a translation unit inside the county, right? The connections matter. So how do we make sure that people who are delivering services know that Suzanne is there to ask them that what-if question of, what if we wrote this in a different way? And she points them to Hemingway Editor or to ChatGPT to help rewrite that language in words that work. We're thinking about celebration and shared accountability. That's accountability from the top and to the top, or to the center, as well as all the way out. That's about being clear about those standards, having a set series, a menu of metrics for constituent experience. We're working with a lab at DC. We're working with the neighbors because there's no reason for us to develop these on our own. The joy of local government. Let's do this all together. And it's about celebration. When Patricia makes it easier for someone to schedule a family to schedule with her, let's celebrate that. When Judith makes it easier for someone experiencing homelessness and trying to get dental services, let's celebrate that, because people are going to copy from each other. It's not just us copying from other governments. How do we create the space for copying within ourselves, better using the technology we already have, better using the budget we already have, better using the people that we already have? And then finally, it's some strategy, right? The accelerator, being an accelerator, we welcome anyone. Whether you're in consumer protection or IT or HR, and there's some amazing people in HR, we're going to have to hire about 6,000 people in the coming years. This is a cliff facing so many words. We have a unique moment to reshape government And so Sam Freshour and Shirley Acetuno and Mariella Leone and Karen Hochberg and Nidhi Singh Rathore, they're working together to change the way in which we do hiring, lifting up bright spots like Lolita in libraries, who has cut the time to hire down to 20 days versus our standard, which is closer to 90, right? So Nidhi helped to lift up what Lolita is doing, put it into a one-pager so the rest of us can copy that work. And that's about listening and responding, and that's about that sort of embracing complexity, right? So what we don't have in our constituent experience initiative is a big plan for how we're going to do this in 15 years.
Right, you're doing it every day.
We're doing it every day, but more importantly, we're treating it more like riding a bicycle, right? You can plan as much as you want to ride a bicycle, but the way you ride a bicycle is you get on the bicycle and you ride it, right? You point yourself in a direction. When we talk about being an accelerator, you can sit in the classroom and talk about innovating as much as you want, right? And it's hilarious if you've ever innovated before, because you're watching people like holding onto the wheels like a steering wheel, and you're like, no, you gotta ride the bicycle, right? You gotta ride the bicycle, and no one can ride the bicycle for you. I can give you the manual, I can't ride the bicycle for you. I can show you the liberatingstructures.org for how to facilitate and include and unleash everyone, but the way that you do it is by going and using liberating structures ourselves. And so as we build this major initiative around constituent experience with its strategy, accountability, and celebration and support structures, we're saying one bit at a time, start small and scale, iterate. Let's try this as an experiment, right? We're surfacing assumptions. If we do these things, then we think this will happen. But it's all about understanding the world, and this I'm borrowing from Fred Laloux, less like a Boeing airplane, complicated, and more like a bowl of spaghetti, complex. Because we, at the end of the day, are a human organization serving our human neighbors. That is a more crazy complexity than anything we can ever imagine. And so in that world, we try to become a more adaptive organization, an organization that learns, an organization that realizes that a bowl of spaghetti, when you pull on a strand, there's no way you can predict what's going to come next. We have incredible advances in technology, but they can't yet model water. Mm-hmm. Right? The world is a remarkable and an incredible place. How do we embrace that complexity as we plan ways to go forward and improve the constituent experience?
Excellent.
Yeah, time by.
I have taken so much of your day and the time that you've put in to prepare, and again, all of the people you've introduced me to, both directly as well as through your stories. Yeah. I am so grateful for your time. I think the work you're doing is extraordinary, and it's fitting that you were our first guest. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for creating the space for us to share, for celebrating success, for holding us accountable. We've now said a bunch of things we're going to do so our constituents can hold us accountable to those things. And as part of a more human government, we always start with a check-in on our team. It's a moment to Well, check in with yourself. I'm a camp counselor who happens to wear a gray suit in government. Check in with yourself and then share. And so we didn't check in, but we can certainly check in out. And we just ask the question, answer it for ourselves, and share what we feel comfortable, challenged by choice. Liz, how are you?
I feel great. I really appreciate the time to talk with you. These are the experiences in my work that I am most thankful for, because it allows me to remember and step back how cool and impactful the work is writ large, and the people that I'm able to meet through it. So I feel wonderful. How are you?
I'm great. A little bit of liberating, this is now out there, so next time someone asks me, I can send them to this. Grateful, and I'm really jazzed about the folks behind the cameras and their small business. Welcome to our small business website. And we'd love to join with you together to creating things better. And to folks who are listening and watching, reach out. We would love to copy from all of you. And we're happy to have you copy anything from us. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Great.